Okay, honest opinion, living in Albania, traveling in Albania, I've spent here quite some time and I've been getting a lot of questions like, Danny, how come you spent such a long time in Albania? I've even got some questions like, how is it in terms of safety? Like, is it safe? So I got a message like, what about the crime? What about the mafia or something like that? And personally, before I traveled to Albania, I didn't know that much about it. You know, with travel being extremely restricted in 2020 and still to this date, there weren't many options. And for me, it wasn't even that much about traveling. It was just finding a base to stay put, together with my girlfriend right now. And Albania presented itself after a flight to Morocco got cancelled. And I was just like, hey, let's stay here for a few weeks, maybe for a month. And it ended up to be seriously one of my favorite countries in the past few years. Definitely in the top 5 for me personally. It took me extremely off guard with its beautiful nature, with its authenticity, hospitality. Like, people are extremely welcoming, extremely also proud of their country in some way, the nature, the heritage. And the intention of this video today is really to maybe clear up some misconceptions about safety here, which I would say overall is nothing really worth worrying about, in terms of really also putting it on the map, because Albania is a country that is extremely underrated. You know, it's positioned between of Greece, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and everybody heard of Greece, beautiful blue islands, this and that, and also they're gonna you know charge you for that. So Albania right now is really in a sweet spot where it's not that discovered yet, and I want to share today with you my honest experience, and not just sugarcoat it, not just be like, was everything great, everything super beautiful. And even though, you know, I also have a significant amount of local people at this point from Albania watching, so really understand that I want to be honest. I want to paint the picture the way it is to its fullest extent. So also mention some of the downsides at the end of the video, which I don't think at all are a big deal, but worth mentioning for sure. So we're going to talk a little bit about safety, about how to get around here, about hospitality and local people's mentality maybe in some way. And yeah, I would say let's get into it. So first of all, if you're new here, my name is Dan, and for the past, at this point, close to 5 years, I've been on and off traveling the world, at this point close to 50 countries. And while at first it has been a lot about just, you know, travel, find yourself, adventure, experience, and there's still some of that in there for sure. At this point, it's more about spending a little bit longer in a country, really getting to know it, looking also at potential opportunities to maybe stay a little bit longer, looking at what are the opportunities in terms of talking to people that have maybe local businesses. That is something that really interests me. Also, I have the bigger goal, ambition to build a few bases in the next 5 to 10 years all over the world, maybe one in Asia, one in Europe. And Albania, for me, really at this point, is a place where I was like, wow, this beauty, the natural beauty especially, like just the capital city, Tirana. Maybe locals to me are just like, yeah, Tirana, whatever, is nice. But for me, like, this city, imagine, is surrounded by humongous mountains and hills. Right now in the winter, if you want to call it, right now it's 15 degrees outside. For the end of the week, it's 20 degrees and sunny. There was even some snow on the top of the mountains. Like, at this point, I've did close to 30 videos. So if you haven't watched any of them, check it out. And seriously, in terms of the scenery, it's one of my favorite countries. Definitely probably in the top 3. And from Tirana, I arrived here the first few weeks. I'm like, I like Tirana. I thought it's a good base. Found the gym, found cafes to work from. And I liked it. Then I was like, let's venture out a little bit. Let's go to the coast. Let's go to the beach. I'm sure it's going to be nice. And I didn't know what is going to expect me, what was in store for me. Like, seriously, some of the most beautiful nature. The blue waters that I found here. I knew, like, in Greece there is somewhere things like that. But just how pure and often untouched yet by mass tourism these places are. Like, I was totally blown away. So in terms of that, this place is extremely underrated. And also, out of all the Balkan countries, the tourism is here. And that's also, like, often ranked quite highly, but it's still, most people, like, you don't hear too often in like Europe, people go to Spain, people go to this, to that, to Greece. And I think, like, Albania is definitely an up and coming destination. So now for this year, next year, the next 5 years, I think it's still a little bit of a hidden secret. And now to get a little bit more into the, let's say, realistic perspective. So at this point, I think I've traveled to, even, you could say, maybe, I don't know, most major cities I've been in the north a lot, in Shkodër, in Theth. I've been in the south, in Saranda and Vlora, and all this like small towns, Dermi, Borsh. So maybe like if you have been around here, you're gonna recognize some of it. Cities like Permet, Gjirokastër 2 times, and if you've never been to Albania, I'm just listing off a bunch of random names. So I've really seen a lot at this point. So in terms of the transportation, it's fairly easy, but it's definitely not as developed as like in other more touristic countries. Like the bus station is outside of Tirana. They will bring you pretty much everywhere, but it's pretty much just a parking lot with buses that have a sign. There's people going to ask you where you want to go. So practically it's very easy to achieve, but also on Google Maps, for whatever reason, the bus connections and everything are not on there. So on the app Move It, they have it. So that took some time for me to figure out. And in terms of the infrastructure, they're building here right now a lot. Almost every city that I go to, they're restoring the roads. Some of the roads here are extremely nice. They just made them probably like last year or a few years ago. Like right now I'm sitting in the city of Pogradec. The road from Tirana to here, it takes 2 hours and the road is flawless for the most part. Kind of like a, medium-sized highway if you want to call it. But at the same time, some more remote villages, you probably need an SUV at least, a 4-wheel. So that's something to keep in mind. The country is really developing, but there's still like some off-road situations. Let's talk a little bit about safety. So for whatever reason, maybe it's the Taken movie with Liam Neeson, and also I talked to some locals. They said that there is some crime, some groups outside of Albania. He told me particularly in the UK. I don't know much about it, so don't quote me on it. And he said that sometimes Albania gets a bad rap for whatever things going on in some way associated with the country. Again, don't want to go too deep into it because I don't know it, but in Albania itself, from what I personally experienced, let's talk about that. Being on the ground, walking around here for months, I haven't seen any crime. There was no moment personally where I felt uncomfortable at all. At no point somebody approached me in whatever way, which sometimes did happen in other countries. And so really from being on the ground, traveling through the country, I have to tell you that at no point I encountered any forms of scams. So if you're in the more touristic countries, well, I don't want to name any names necessarily, but some of the places that I recently visited, people really try to get like a bunch of money off of you, which is at like a higher level of tourism, also understandable in some way, and definitely more common. So that really doesn't happen here at all. And also a friend of mine told me, which I can definitely see, like a local guy here, that he said that in many places, especially in a little bit of the more smaller towns in Albania, the community is not that big, so people in some way stick together and also everybody kind of knows each other. So personally, I gotta say, I felt absolutely safe throughout my time here. Never have been in the moment where it was edgy. I've been actually in moments where locals really came to help. Like this one time, a tire got stuck in kind of like a little bit of a ditch when we were driving the car. I'm like trying to like freaking get the Jeep out of there, and like 2 local guys are running up, getting on the back of the Jeep, trying to put some weight on the back to get me out of the ditch. So like really that took like 30 seconds for people to run up and help me out. So small things like that. And generally I would say also in terms of foreigners, the tourism is not that high yet. And also people are proud of their country, proud of their nation. So what you usually will encounter, or at least that's how it was for me, whenever you meet people, they really want to show you their culture. They want to invite you in their home. They want to sometimes maybe even like feed you or house you or whatever, that happened before where people were like that, which is very nice. And it definitely comes from, there's not that many people passing through here, and the people are interested in welcoming towards outsiders for the most part. So I think that is, a big factor. Some countries are not as much like that. They're more suspicious towards like people from the outside. Like, who are you? What do you want here? Here so far it has been nothing but very, very welcoming. Like it's always a matter of how you carry yourself. If you look very lost and very like whatever, no matter what country you are in, you're gonna be, let's say, an easier victim, if you will. So that is in terms of traveling, you are definitely gonna be fine, especially if you're gonna have the common sense approach of like whatever, not walking alone through the smallest alleys of the side street. I don't think anything will happen personally. And another question that I got is like, is Albania a Muslim country and is it strict, and what were your feelings about that? And in that way, if you look it up online, you might get the perception. Personally, I have to say there's like some nice looking mosques, maybe around Tirana or something like that, but personally, I didn't see a big influence necessarily of religion on the country and the population. And when I looked into it a little bit, some people say that, let's say, the main religion of Albania is like being Albanian in a way, and also due to the communist era where it was like really suppressed. The way I observe it, at least as a tourist, is that there is not that much that you at least see on the surface in terms of not that big of a presence. Like, you don't go through a city and you feel like, oh, this is like a very like Muslim or Christian town, and they actually have both, and very often there's also like a mosque and a church in the same city. And personally, I didn't necessarily feel like it's a Muslim country or a Christian country. It's definitely mixed in many ways. Like, we also stayed at some guest houses that were Christian families, and I just feel like also we stayed at this one guest house where she was saying like her family is Christian and her husband's family is Muslim or however. So personally, my impression was that it's you're not really gonna notice. At least I didn't notice. I've been to some Muslim countries before, and like, let's say take for example Turkey. There you definitely notice it a little bit more. Alright guys, and so I think the last thing I want to touch on today is also a little bit the downside. So before I told like I had some of the best time traveling, some of the best road trips, some of the most amazing nature, but definitely one of the problems that personally is not bothering me that much, but many people have been commenting on it in the videos because I don't sugarcoat everything, is a certain garbage disposal problem. So sometimes if the city is a little bit more busy, you're gonna find like garbage in the corner, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot, and sometimes also at very beautiful places. Like recently we have been to Cape of Rodon, and especially if there is water, like the water brings all the trash. So in some places there is definitely a bit of a trash problem, which I think is not a huge deal. It is definitely unfortunate, and hopefully in the future, and yeah, hopefully it's gonna get better in the future. I think everybody can agree that it would be nice to have this beautiful. In terms of safety, I would say there's some crazy driving going on here. So personally, I was driving a bit like that. That was probably the only time I felt a little bit uncomfortable in Albania, when there is like the guy in the back, pass. I actually enjoy driving here, but it can sometimes get a little bit crazy. Nothing, again, that I didn't experience in Eastern European countries. And what else did I write down? Oh yeah, another thing that maybe you would observe, again, just to come up with something that is unfortunate a little bit, is that there is often unfinished buildings. So if you drive around the highways, sometimes they're still under construction, but often you see somebody just started something and it just stands there. It doesn't look great, but still, again, not a big deal. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's like a huge problem, but you definitely do see that around. Also, to touch on some of the negatives, for me personally, I even sometimes feel a little bit upset when I see how the country gets a bad rap in some ways. Some people might think there is like high crime here, and most people don't know how beautiful the country is. That was also for me kind of like, yeah, I really feel good about putting the country on the map, putting out a lot of content about it, because I think the tourism here is definitely going to grow with the few problems that are here that needed to be fixed. Hopefully also the economy is going to do better. I think there's a lot of potential for tourism in this country. And me personally, even I had some thoughts going through my mind, potentially, maybe, I don't know, making it as one of my bases in the future. I'll definitely be looking into other places as well, but as far as I heard, foreigners also have the opportunity to start businesses here, and I saw some really cool businesses in terms of accommodation, hotels. Like for me, maybe at some point I also plan maybe to set up my own space, maybe kind of like an Airbnb, freelance, maybe build a gym next to it. Don't know yet where I want to do it, and the thought did cross my mind to have the Got a World to See headquarters potentially in a place that is as like naturally beautiful as Albania, like maybe somewhere on a mountain, on the coast, not too far from Tirana, so you can still easily fly out and fly in. That is the really cool thing about Albania, is that all of the country you can reach pretty much within like 5 to like 7, maybe 8 hours of driving, like from one, like, you know, to the other. From Tirana, you can get to the most beautiful beaches within a few hours drive. So the country is not big, so it's very easy to like take road trips. This country is seriously made for road trips, some extremely beautiful roads. And so with that, I would say enough complimenting, enough. Personally, I had an amazing time. For everyone, especially who was into adventure traveling. But if you want to go somewhere where many of the places are yet undiscovered, where sometimes you're going to be the only person on top of a mountain breathing the freshest air far away from civilization, maybe with one guest house in the corner with a local family that is going to cook you only the local produce, so yet extremely undiscovered, extremely authentic. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. As always, smash the thumbs up button. If you're new here, consider subscribing. Here on the channel, I document my life around traveling in different places, living in different places. And if you want to know what else I'm up to, I will link a few of my projects in the description box below. Another channel that I'm running, podcasts, things like that, blah, blah, blah. Join me on Instagram. There, if you have a question, you can get into my direct message. Sometimes I find some like weird stuff there that you don't want to really see, but if I get a cool question, I always try to get around to answering it. And as always, you too got a world to see.